Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Series 6 of the Climate Pioneers Show. Throughout the course of this series, we are discussing the challenges around scaling deep tech solutions within climate. I'm going to be speaking to investors, founders, venture builders, and other key ecosystem players who are all focused on the same common goal of scaling and commercializing groundbreaking deep tech innovations. We're going to be exploring how to prepare for the unique challenges that deep tech companies face around fundraising, scaling, and team building. And we'll hear stories of those who have successfully scaled their businesses to Series A and beyond. So whether you're a founder yourself embarking upon the scale-up journey and you want to learn from people who've been there and done it, maybe you're an investor thinking about diversifying your investment strategy into hardware solutions, or maybe you're somebody that's just really passionate about climate innovation and you want to hear about the cool things that people are building. Whatever your inclination, there should be something for you throughout the course of the series. And today I'm joined for episode 6 by Dave Wardell, Chief Commercial Officer at measurable.energy. Dave has a strong background of scaling both hardware and software businesses, as well as in his last 2 roles, businesses that are a blend of the two. So I'm really excited for Dave to be with us and sharing his experience over the years. Dave, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Jerry. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. So are you happy to kick off by telling us more about Measurable Energy? Who is the solution for? What is the problem that you're solving?
Sure. Really the problem it's solving is that in commercial buildings generally, and I'll make general statements, but in commercial buildings, about 40% of the energy, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, is made up, being consumed by devices which are plugged in, everyday devices that you and I would recognize, things like monitors and TVs and coffee machines and water heaters and wall heaters and all of those types of devices. And about half of the power that they use typically is wasted. Wow. And we all recognize, if you go and walk into your office, you see monitors on standby, you see TVs that are on, and zip taps that have got water boiling ready to go. And so what Measurable Energy does is it finds that and eliminates that wasted energy, thereby saving kilowatt hours and carbon emissions and pounds, shillings and pence as well.
Brilliant. And a really easy win for these companies. You don't have to adopt anything new, really change anything, but immediately save huge amounts of money and emissions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we sort of fall into the category of sort of a quick win, if you like. So we make great savings. If we can save 40 to 50% on a deployment, then that would be typical for us. And compared to other projects, like particularly in sustainability, projects like PV or heat pumps, if you can access them, they can provide big savings, but often the payback's a long time, whereas we would tend to be in a year or 18 months. So much smaller cost, but quick payback.
Amazing. Perfect. And tell us your journey. I mean, I'm always really interested in people's personal journeys and how they got to where they are today. So tell us, what was the path that led you to Measurable Energy, and how did you get to know the team and end up coming on board?
Yeah, and my previous role actually was in a building tech company, a sustainability tech company, and I was headhunted into Measurable Energy. But the reason why I joined, frankly, were the founders, Dan and Josh, their mission, and the carbon reduction mission, which was similar at my previous role as well. And I think as I've got older, I've become more driven by that mission of leaving the planet to our kids in a better state than we inherited it, or it is now. And I think that's got stronger in me as I've got older. And so that alignment with the Measurable Energy mission was really important for me in choosing to join.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you joined them towards the end of 2023, and just for context, early 2023, Measurable Energy in the January closed their Series A raise. So you kind of joined just post Series A as they're on that scale up mission. Talk us through where the company was in terms of product market fit, in terms of maturity at the point at which you joined.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so first and foremost, it's a great product that people want to buy, and so from that perspective, the product market fit, that the foundations were there. I've sold or tried to sell products in the past with very low product market fit, and it's really hard. So the fundamentals of the product are there. I think the business at that point, this is around about 11 months ago, so at the end of 23, it would be, I would describe it as our American cousins would describe it as throwing spaghetti at the wall. So I think the business was making sales across a number of sectors, quite a lot of first deployments, trial deployments, so small numbers of products being deployed to pretty much anybody who wanted to ask for them. And they were great results. So yeah, don't get me wrong, really good results. And but a lot of selling to lots of different sectors, and yeah, not that much focus. I would say that was what it was like, yeah, when I joined.
Cool. So like they had a technology that they knew worked, was tested, had commercial deployments, great proof points, but a little bit scattergun and not a kind of clear commercial strategy to build.
That's a great summary.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And so how have you seen that evolve in the last year, and how, because I think what will be particularly interesting is a lot of our listeners will be early stage founders, and, Series A will be on the horizon. They won't quite be there yet. So I think, and commercialization, especially with solutions for where there's a hardware component, is often a big challenge. So talk us through how, I know you've done this previously at your last organization and then here. Talk us through how you approach that from a commercial standpoint, and how you take that and kind of hone that into a commercial strategy that's going to help them scale.
It's a really good question. I think there are three parts to the answer, Cherry, and they often sound a lot easier to say than actually do. So the first thing that we did, first thing I did on joining, was prioritize. So heavily prioritize what we were doing and focusing on what we were doing. So it's a small team, and we have very limited bandwidth, and so we have to get the biggest bang for buck from the team that we have, the customers and the engagements that we do. So we said a lot of no's to things. We picked the go-to-market plan, came into being and focused firmly on 2 priority sectors of customers that we would spend our outbound marketing and sales efforts on, and we would entertain inbound. We would qualify those really hard, but we would focus really heavily on 2 priority sectors and the personas within those sectors who are our strongest buyers and influencers. So lots of qualification and lots of saying no and lots of focus. So that was kind of number one. Number two, and that's really hard to do, because at an early stage, right? Turning a customer down and saying, no, I'm not going to sell to you, particularly for an early stage business, a startup, is incredibly difficult to do. But if it's a good product and it solves a real world problem, they will come back. And so, yeah. So yeah, it's easier to say than do. The second area was heavily customer focused. So we've done a lot of trials, a lot of those first deployments, lots of testing, a few, for us, the electrical sockets, a few deployments here of, 20 here, 10 there. And so what we did was focus heavily on customer onboarding. That's critical because we have the same or very similar growth strategy that many startups and scale-ups have, which is a kind of land and grow. So you can do one deployment to start, and then you can widen that to a much bigger full rollout, and that applies to software as well as to our business, as you said, which is software and hardware. And so that's a great strategy. But if your initial landing doesn't work and you have an unhappy customer, then the growing part doesn't happen. So yeah, we focused loads on great onboarding, making sure customers were delighted. We measured KPIs like speed to savings, customer satisfaction, and yeah, really got the data behind a great onboarding. And then the third one was incredibly easy to say but difficult to do, and that was to keep it simple. So I'm a big fan of keep it simple. If something works, and in a go-to-market plan, that might be a certain sector and a certain persona. If it works and you can repeat that success, then do more. If it doesn't work, then stop. So there was lots of trying to keep it simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Which again is, much harder to do than to say, right? Because I suppose when we are so in our own businesses and our own solutions, it can be easy to get too into the weeds and to forget to keep it simple, right? And so talk us through, because we've made the distinction there a couple of times, right, that Measurable Energy is not a pure hardware business, right? It has a hardware component, but there is also a software piece. Talk us through what that software component is, how the two interplay, and what the solution looks like holistically.
Yeah, sure. So the software is really the bit that's the clever part for Measurable Energy. So it's the machine learning that sits on the sockets themselves. So we actually only make the sockets because nobody else can.
Okay.
And in the future, I definitely personally, I see a future where a partner, for example, would make the hardware, and then we would kind of load the Measurable Energy brain into the socket, and that kind of model I definitely see as a future possibility. But for now, we have the two. So we have the Measurable Energy platform, the machine learning that sits on the sockets, and then all of the energy data being recorded, carbon emissions being recorded, and all the clever stuff going on at the local level. So what that means is that the software is identifying what device is plugged in. So if you plug in a TV, it knows it's a TV, and it knows it's a TV on standby. And then also looking at when that device is being used. So if it sees that that device is on standby all night and all weekend, then with the help of some humans to curate that process, we can make sure that that device is switched off when it's not needed. And then all of the brains, if you like, in the software is then being acted upon by the socket itself, which can power down that device for those periods, obviously in agreement with the customer.
So the defensibility, the USP is really in the ML, right, and in the software that sits behind it, and then the socket itself is sort of the conduit for that, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Your last business, which is Infogrid, and this business, both blend of hardware and software. Prior to that, a lot of your career was very software, SaaS focused. What's been the difference moving into that world where hardware has become a component within the solution? What noticeable differences have you seen in the challenges that those businesses face as they then go on that growth journey? Are there different challenges that arise, and what are they?
I think there are different challenges. I think there are different benefits as well, actually. But from the challenges side, you obviously have some kind of installation stage. So for us, we're installing sockets or extension leads into buildings, and that requires some work to liaise with the customer to make sure that that's all done smoothly. And our savings can't be delivered unless those devices are installed into a customer. It's a relatively simple job. A desk extension just gets plugged in. A socket in a wall on a heater, for example, needs an electrician to do it. It's not that specialized, but it still needs an electrician to swap an existing socket for one of ours. So there is there's no benefit obviously without any kind of cost. That, I guess, that for us is the biggest hurdle, but the savings are so good, and we can manage those installations out of hours. They don't disrupt customers, and so it doesn't become much of a hurdle really in the whole scheme of things. We've never had a customer say, I don't want to do it because you have to install sockets in my building. On the software side, of course, we have the same IT, infosec, cybersecurity to go through that any SaaS business does. So, and I've been through those processes with big corporate customers, both for pure SaaS as well as at Measurable Energy, which is obviously a blend of the two. Infosec, I think, is a process that all SaaS businesses will have to go through. And being compliant from a cyber perspective is really important, as well as GDPR and ISO compliant, and all of those things are just the same for us with software and hardware as they are for a pure SaaS business.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And I suppose the software component, am I right in thinking that that software component isn't actually seen by the customer? That's something that makes the socket work internally, and they don't have, do they have a dashboard or?
They do have a view if they want it. It tends not to be a big part of their proposition. You can see the data, energy data, you can see the savings. We present those savings and carbon reduction to them. So reporting is incredibly important in the carbon world. Big companies have to report their carbon emissions and their savings. And so we provide a mechanism to do that and save them time. And they also improve, obviously, accuracy. We're reporting energy very accurately at a device level. So often that modeling is done at a building level and it's not very accurate. We can obviously provide a very accurate reports that sort of substitute some of that manual work. So they do have a view of that.
Okay.
But mostly customers don't log in to dashboards. They don't need another dashboard. And so we tend not to get, the service will run without people looking at dashboards. So it's perfectly usable without that.
Yeah. So I suppose in that sense, from an implementation perspective, whilst it does require specialists like an electrician to come in and physically change some of the sockets, from a user onboarding perspective, they're not having to learn how to use a complicated piece of software. It's a transition that sort of happens, like you said, out of hours, and then automatically in the background is saving them money. So I suppose, in terms of scale,
it's incredibly simple. If all they wanted to do is log in once a month and run a report that creates a PDF that says, this is how much energy you've used, this is how much carbon emissions you've made, and how much you've paid for your power, and then how much you've saved with the system. Because of course we know when we're switching off devices, we know what they would have used had they been on. So at a very granular level, we can say, right, you have saved this amount in carbon, in kilowatt hours, and in pounds. You may only log in once a month to download a report or have that delivered to you automatically, and that's probably as much as most people need.
True. And we talked there about, I said a moment ago, about lots of the people that listen to this being those early stage founders. There aren't quite at the point of Series A yet. And so hearing stories of, founders that have gone through that milestone and out the other side and are now kind of on that Series A to Series B journey, they're always very interested in, what does that phase look like? And what could I be thinking about now to prepare for that? So are you happy to share with us post Series A, what the focus is now within the business from a commercial perspective? What are the core milestones that you need to achieve, looking ahead to if you're planning to raise a Series B? How's the horizon shifted and what's the focus now for the business?
Yeah, it's a great question, because Series B is incredibly different, obviously, to A. They tend to be much an order of magnitude larger or more. In my humble experience, Cherry, I think that investors are really looking at, particularly at Series B. I think this is true earlier, but I think particularly at Series B, they're looking for, from a commercial perspective at least, they're looking for a repeatable, scalable, predictable revenue engine, if you like, on the front of the business. And what that means is that from their perspective, from an investor's perspective, they need to know with quite a lot of confidence that if you plug in more, excuse the pun, plug in more marketing, sales and customer success people, then you have a very good prediction of what will come out the other end. So if you add another sales development rep, for example, that's building pipeline, then you know exactly what the cost of that is, where their investment is being spent, but you also know what you're going to get out the other end of it. So I think that sort of predictability, repeatability of the commercial engine, if you like, on the business is critical for investors, and really that comes down to data. And so the good thing about marketing and sales is that it is incredibly data rich, whether it's lead nurturing or or deal cycles, stages and times and ARR creation. There's so much data in it, and so yeah, what my focus has been in scale ups is to have that rich data to be able to very accurately predict, okay, if I spend investment on a particular resource at a particular salary or grade level, then I know what I'm going to get out of it at the other end in ARR, and I can be, and investors can be confident that that's what they're going to get as a return.
Yeah, excellent. And for businesses that are approaching that point, so pre-Series A, what can they be doing, or what should they be doing from a commercial standpoint to ready themselves, or to lay the foundations well for once they get to that point?
I think it comes down to, so a couple of areas that I've mentioned before. So prioritizing, I think is critical. So I think repeatability really only comes when you've focused on particular sectors, personas, and you've repeated the success of what you've done, and demonstrable repeatability. Case studies are absolutely critical. We have an OKR around case studies, about publishing them and building a pipeline of future case studies. Customers are very tribal, and they often don't want to be the first in their sector to jump, but they also don't want to be the last. So case studies are critical, particularly in and around Series A. You have to be able to say to a potential customer that somebody like them has bought already and is getting benefit. And then similarly, the onboarding piece, if you get that right, scale comes from growing existing customers mainly. So you may have 10% of a customer addressable value in the first deal, and then full rollout might be 10 times that. So growth definitely comes from onboarding. And in order to be able to measure all of those things, you just need data. So I think there's a lot of prep work. And whenever I start that kind of journey, I spend a lot of time in the CRM, making sure that everything is being logged, every data point. Sometimes CRMs aren't that great at recording things, and taking those sort of historical data points that you need, whether it's marketing or sales. I strongly recommend making sure that data is incredibly rich, because if you're not putting those steps in place to record it, you can't go back and do it retrospectively. So it's incredibly important to make that prep and have that really rich data. So then you can walk into an investor and say, well, the reason why we're focusing on sector A and sector B is because look at their results. Look at the KPIs. The conversion rate's better, the sales cycle's faster, the deal sizes are bigger, or whatever that KPI is. You can demonstrate that success. It's only the data from the CRM in that case that will give you that confidence, and give the investors confidence.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think early stage, maybe often there always isn't a CRM, right? So in terms of those very early stages, like embryonic stages, and building this stuff out from scratch, quite often in those earliest days, it'll be the founders themselves who perhaps are not from a commercial background, but will lead on most of the commercial strategy, commercial activity, and they will do the selling themselves. What do you, this is a very ambiguous question, so apologies in advance. It's not an easy one to answer. But at what point do you think there should be a commercial leader brought in, if there isn't one already within the founding team? And at what point do you think a sales engine or a sales function like this needs to start being formed in some way, so people can kind of get ahead of that?
That's a really good question. And I think it would probably vary quite a lot in my experience. So, for example, so I NED for a software business called Building Passport, and that is a business where there are two employees, the founder, CEO, and then the second employee who we recruited about 9 months ago is the first sales rep. So somebody building their own pipeline, closing revenue, doing everything. So posting things on LinkedIn and doing all the marketing side as well. But essentially employee number 2 is an account exec in sales parlance. So a sales guy. It is a guy in this case. And so I would say that often in that case there's not a CTO or a tech founder alongside. That was done differently. So if you had a CEO CTO duo, then I would say that probably the next hire is a sales hire, which means that the CEO can focus on other things, particularly investors.
Absolutely. And I think to that point with investors, I think the expectation around commercial traction and being able to evidence that there's an appetite for this in the market and there's demand and that customers are interested is coming earlier and earlier and earlier into the conversation, and expected at an even earlier stage, right? So you're right. I think having somebody in that sales role earlier that can start to demonstrate that, and to your point, can start to get those data points in place to help build out that business case or justify your business plan to investors, is really, really important for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Where are you at now with Measurable Energy? Are you happy to share sort of in the last year from a sales function, what that looks like within Measurable Energy and what your plans are as a business for the rest of this year?
Yeah, sure. We're still quite a small team. So the whole business is fewer than 30 people. We have 2 new business salespeople. We're just going through a process of recruiting a sales development rep, an SDR. We've never really done outbound sales before. So that's a new role we're recruiting right now. So that would be sort of 3 people doing sort of outbound and sort of business development, if you like. We have an account manager looking after some key partners, and that is it from the sales side. We have 1 person in marketing, plus we'll recruit 1 more in the not too distant future, plus 3 people in customer success. So not long after I joined, that was my first hire, was somebody to beef up customer success. As I mentioned, the priority was hugely on customer onboarding. We absolutely must make sure that customers are happy, that they don't churn, they don't decide that it's all too difficult, and they think that expanding is a no-brainer. So yeah, our first focus was on CS, but then on top of that, there was a lot of work on automating processes and getting things out of people's heads and making those processes, particularly onboarding, making it repeatable, making it scalable. And then as we go towards the end of 2024, yeah, we've pivoted away from those first early trials. As I said, doing small test projects. We don't test the technology anymore. Our language externally is much more confident to customers. We have minimum order values. We're deploying projects with thousands of sockets, not tens. So we kind of gone through that scaling journey. At least from a marketing perspective, we say no, we're not doing trials anymore. The technology is proven, and if you want to do a first deployment, that's fine, but we're not testing anything. It's proven technology. And so really the rest of this year is about focusing on scale customer, at scale customers. And also what I'm really excited about is partners. So we haven't really developed a reseller partner channel, and so I'm starting to have the first conversations with a small number of sort of expert resellers, and I'm really excited about the fact that could then use the scale that they have, their customer base, their commercial teams that will be 10 times the size of ours, to open up scale for our business, through that sort of reseller partner channel. That's where we're going right now, which is incredibly exciting.
How exciting. And what changes, I mean, I ask this question of everybody, but what changes could there be? Because, we're all focused on how we can help companies to scale quicker, faster, and remove the blockers that might be preventing that fast scale, right? So from like a bigger horizon, like a wider economic regulatory landscape perspective, are there certain blockers there that are slowing you down, certain objections that you face that if they were to be removed would really help accelerate your mission?
Yeah, So I think actually we're really lucky from the perspective that our blockers, if you like, we're sort of throttled, if you like, internally. Our bandwidth is our biggest blocker, which is a great place to be. And we've had to focus on making sure that we could scale. At the end of 2023, if I brought more salespeople in, we would have just created a load more unhappy customers and they would have churned. So that we weren't in a position to do that then, but now we truly are, and we can recruit salespeople and really put more fuel in that engine and see much more results. So we're lucky from that perspective that we're probably throttled more by internal than we are external. But having said that, the legislation around sustainability, and particularly with corporate businesses, is only getting more and more in our favor from a measurable energy perspective, or in any sustainability focused business. It's always going to be going in the right direction. So at the moment, there's legislation, obviously, that means that big corporate companies have to report their carbon emissions. There are obligations to reduce that comes from the sector pressure as well as legislation, and we benefit from those. So that legislation will continue. It will be adopted by smaller and smaller companies, smaller commercial entities over time. So at the moment, reporting applies, say, for example, down to businesses of 250 people or 10 million in turnover. They will get smaller and smaller. So that's great for us. It means that more and more companies turn to businesses like Measurable Energy to help them. And so if that can come quicker, then that's obviously great for us. So it tends to be a bit slow, but we do see that coming, and that would obviously accelerate the need for technology like ours.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Well, Dave, thank you so much for spending your lunchtime with me, and for sharing the experience that you've gained and giving some of those insights there that I think will be really valuable to businesses, especially slightly earlier on in that journey, at that kind of pre-seed, seed stage, that are looking ahead and thinking, how can they start to build a better commercial strategy to take them to the next stage? And it sounds like what you're building at Measurable Energy is very exciting and, on a great trajectory. So yeah, I definitely look forward to seeing how that carries on over the next year or so. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's been really lovely to chat to you. Thank you to everybody that has listened today. We will not be with you next week. We're having a week off. But the following week, we will be back with 3 more episodes. On, I think, the 28th is our next one. So do please come back and join us week after next. But for now, thanks to everyone for listening. And thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you, Joe.
There we go. I've just hit end. So that's